Dolpopa's Mountain Dharma, The Birth of the Zhentong View. A commentary by the Venerable Kenshin Thrangu Rinpoche, Geshe Larampa. Chapter 1. An Introduction to Dolpopa's Teachings. Many of you may not have heard of Dolpopa Sherab Gyaltsen, who lived in Tibet in the 14th century CE. He was a greatly respected practitioner and teacher who added another dimension to our understanding of Dharma by introducing the Zhentong view, which is very important to Buddhist practice and is usually translated as the empty of other view. I would like to introduce you here to Dolpopa's book, Mountain Dharma, that we will be studying. Its first topic is an introduction to the subject of zhentong. When we talk about the Zhentong view, there will be some scholars who will praise its qualities and other scholars who ferociously try to refute the Zhentong view. Because of this controversy, we might develop doubts about the validity of the Zhentong view. But really, it is not necessary to have these doubts. What we should do is to understand that the Zhentong view is extremely important. At this time, in terms of the Mountain Dharma that we are talking about, I, Thrangu Rinpoche, am not going to give a word-by-word explanation of it. The reason is that this book is over 400 pages long, and we have only a week for teachings. Also, this book has been translated into English, and all of you can look at the translation and read it. Rather, I am going to teach this text according to the outline made by Dolpopa of Mountain Dharma. The outline commences with an overview. The overview begins with a brief teaching on the ground, path, and result, dividing the book into three main parts. First, it presents the true meaning of the ground, path, and fruition. Second, it gives a brief discussion on how this is described in the Buddhist scriptures. And third, it describes the ground, path, and result, or fruition, in terms of the three bodies, Sanskrit kayas, of the Buddhas. When we hear about the Zhentong view, we might wonder, where does this philosophical view come from? To answer this question, we can begin with the idea that we can say that the Buddha taught the Dharma in various stages called the three turnings of the Wheel of Dharma. The instructions of the first turning were the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the Eightfold Path. By turning the wheel of Dharma for the first time, the Buddha helped his students develop the desire to enter the gate of Dharma. This later became called the foundation vehicle, which is also called the Theravada tradition or the Shravakayana. Many centuries later, additional Dharma teachings were needed, so the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma for a second time. This second turning was called the wheel of the Dharma of no characteristics. These teachings were primarily taught by the Buddha at Vulture Peak Mountain near Rajgir, India. Here, the Buddha taught mainly the Prajnaparamita, or transcendent wisdom, which logically explained that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. The Prajnaparamita consisted mainly of teachings on the 16 different types of emptiness and how the Buddha's students could learn how to develop certainty that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. The second turning of the wheel became the Middle Way, Madhyamaka school. The Middle Way school appeared around the 2nd century CE and was thoroughly developed and debated by many different Indian Buddhist scholars in many treatises for centuries afterward. Later, in the 8th century, when these treatises were brought to Tibet, the Middle Way teachings would be labeled as the rangtong, or self-empty teachings. After the second turning, the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma again in many different places. This third turning was called the Wheel of Good Differentiation. It was a set of teachings that proposed that phenomena were empty on the relative level of reality, but this emptiness was not a mere voidness or dead emptiness. In the third turning, it was taught that emptiness also has a quality of wisdom or cognizance called luminous clarity, Tibetan salwa, which pervades and permeates all sentient beings. This third turning also taught that Buddha nature is a universal nature present in all sentient beings. This was described by the Buddha in sutras such as the King of Samadhi and the Descent into Lanka, Lankavatara, as well as in many other sutras. Dolpopa's The Mountain Dharma is primarily a teaching of the third turning of the Wheel of Dharma. Once the Buddha had turned the wheel of Dharma 3 times, the Buddhist teaching spread and flourished. Who was responsible for making the Dharma spread and flourish in the second and third turnings? It was primarily the venerable teacher Nagarjuna and the great practitioner Asanga, as well as many other gifted scholars and practitioners who were called the 6 Ornaments. These people were born in India, taught the Dharma, and wrote treatises expounding on the intent of the Buddha's words. The most famous of these great scholars was Nagarjuna of the second turning, who wrote 3 different collections of teachings, a collection of conversations, a collection on the logic and reasoning on emptiness, and a third collection of praises to the Dharma. The collection of conversations was primarily concerned with how to behave in the relative world. In his book Letter to a Friend, Nagarjuna gave advice to a king about governing in worldly affairs. The second collection was mainly composed on the meaning of transcendent wisdom, Prajnaparamita. This collection comprises 6 treatises explaining the middle way, or Madhyamaka. These treatises helped students understand the difficult topic of emptiness. The third collection of praises included teachings such as in praise of the Dharma Dhatu, Dharma Dhatu Stava. This collection explained the existence of Buddha nature present within all sentient beings. Of these 3 different collections by Nagarjuna, the collection of reasonings explaining emptiness and the middle way became his most widely known teachings. Several hundred years later, the great practitioner Asanga received 5 treatises from the Buddha Maitreya called the 5 Treatises of Maitreya. Asanga was able to actually go to the Tushita Pure Land and directly meet the Buddha Maitreya there. He received these teachings and brought them back to our world so they could be studied by others. Of these 5 treatises of Maitreya, the most important one is called the Uttaratantra, or Ratnagotra Vibhaga in Sanskrit, or the Sublime Continuum in English. The Uttaratantra is primarily a commentary on the third turning of the Wheel of Dharma. It explains that Buddha nature is present within all sentient beings and how this nature is obscured in sentient beings. While this was the main teaching of Asanga and his followers, that does not mean that Asanga did not also teach on emptiness. Rather, Asanga taught that emptiness also possesses the quality of luminous clarity. The rangtong, empty of self, and zhentong, empty of other schools. When the Dharma came to Tibet in the 8th century, the commentaries on the second turning concerning emptiness became known as the rangtong, empty of self school, while Asanga's commentaries on the third turning became known as the zhentong, empty of other school. The teachings of the rangtong and zhentong schools are basically 2 views on emptiness. We may ask whether rangtong and zhentong contradict one another. Are there times when the teachings of rangtong are not in accord with the zhentong, or when the zhentong teachings are not in accord with the rangtong? Many scholars have said that these 2 teachings are contradictory, but that is not correct. To understand the rangtong teachings, we must understand the zhentong view. In order to understand the zhentong teachings, we must first understand the rangtong view. In fact, understanding rangtong makes the zhentong view much clearer to grasp. Likewise, understanding zhentong makes the rangtong view much clearer. In other words, we need to understand that these 2 approaches are actually supporting each other so that there are no contradictions between these 2 types of teachings. To put it another way, the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma was made clearer by the second turning. Then these 2 turnings were made even clearer by the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma. All 3 of these turnings of the Buddhist Dharma wheel have now spread widely across the world. To understand the zhentong and the rangtong teachings, we need to understand the logic of these 2 approaches to emptiness and have some experience with these 2 views. In the tradition of the Vajrayana in Tibet, our understanding of the Dharma is divided into 3 steps. First, we listen to or study the Dharma. Second, we contemplate it, doing this primarily through logical reasoning and inference to understand the foundation of the Dharma. This is primarily done by studying the Middle Way Sutras. We also study the Shastras, or commentaries on the words of the Buddha. Third, we verify our studying and our contemplation by meditating upon it. Primarily, we do this by practicing the creation stage and the completion stage of the deity. During the completion stage, after the dissolution of the deities, we do Mahamudra, or Dzogchen practice. We will discuss this in detail later. It might seem that studying the Dharma, then contemplating what we learned, and then finally meditating on it are separate activities. However, these 3, listening, contemplating, and meditating, should be done as a unified whole. The first reason we need to unify our study and our practice is that while we are listening and contemplating the Dharma, we should be able to think, oh, that's what was happening to me in my meditation. Then, when we study something and experience it in our meditation, we think, oh, that's what I was studying. That is actually how it is. When we study the zhentong view, this is the view which unifies the sutras and the tantras. Zhentong and rangtong both teach that sentient beings are empty of inherent existence, but zhentong also teaches that sentient beings have Buddha nature. Understanding this is extremely beneficial for our practice. Zhentong also states that although everything is empty, we must still meditate on the deity in our practice. In the zhentong view, when we meditate upon the creation phase, where we visualize the deity as being pure, we can develop the understanding that the Yidam deity is something within ourselves. This deity represents the Buddha nature that is within us. When we meditate upon the deity, we are meditating with our own luminous clarity. The second reason we need to unify study and practice is that As we reach the completion phase of practice, some of us will meditate upon the Great Seal, Mahamudra, and others will meditate upon the Great Perfection, Dzogchen. In the rangtong view, we are primarily using logical reasoning to understand the nature of phenomena. When we are practicing Mahamudra or Dzogchen, we look directly at the mind. First, we use our logic in our studying. Then, when it comes to practice, we look directly or non-conceptually at mind to see what it is. When we do this, we may think, oh, that's what they meant. That's what it is. In this way, studying becomes a real support to our practice. Therefore, we study the zhentong, which is the union of the sūtras and the tantras. The third reason we need to unify study and practice is that when we are practicing the creation phase, it is possible to have doubts remaining about visualizing ourselves as the deity by thinking, I'm not actually the deity, I'm just an ordinary person. How is it possible for me to visualize myself as something that I am not? I'm not Chen Rezig or Chakrasamvara or Vajrayogini. I'm just an ordinary person. In fact, some practitioners incorrectly say that the creation phase of the deity is just imagination. If our visualization of the deity is imaginary, then how will it be possible to achieve any positive result from our meditation? Visualizing ourselves as a deity is actually very beneficial because we already have Buddha nature present within us. Our Buddha nature is the essence of the wisdom of the meditational deity. Therefore, by seeing our Buddha nature as it is, and by seeing ourselves as we actually are, the creation phase will bring about a wonderful result. We should not think, oh, I'm an impure person, a really bad person, and the deity is perfect and pure. If we think that way, there will be no way that we will be able to receive any blessings from the practice. However, in deity practice, we perceive ourselves as we are. We see our body as the body of the deity. We perceive our speech as the speech of the deity. We perceive our mind as the wisdom of the deity. If we meditate with this view, we will be able to receive the blessings of this practice. Hence, it is extremely important in zhentong that we engage in the creation phase of the Yidam deity rather than seeing the meditation as being something that is completely empty. The fourth reason to unify our study and practice while we are doing Mahamudra or Dzogchen, practices which look at mind non-conceptually as described in the zhentong view, is that without studying and understanding the view, it will be hard to know what our meditation experiences mean, and which are, in fact, meaningful. For example, to practice Mahamudra, we have the teachings of the great practitioner Saraha, who taught the 3 cycles of Dohas. We also have teachings from the great practitioner Dolpopa, who taught the Ganges Mahamudra and other spiritual songs. Dolpopa and Naropa were great Mahasiddhas with extraordinary abilities and experiences. To reach their high level of spiritual attainment, we first need to have a strong understanding and certainty of the view. We can't just rest in samadhi and be able to do Mahamudra. Rather, we need to correctly understand emptiness. To do this, we need to have the zhentong view. When we begin to understand emptiness intellectually, we can begin understanding our experiences in our Mahamudra meditation. However, if we do not first logically understand emptiness, then when we have a meditative experience, we will think, well, is this really what is supposed to happen? Therefore, it is very important that we understand the zhentong view that teaches the union of emptiness and the expansive wisdom, Dharma Dhatu. This is the view that the third Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje, expounded on when he taught the practice of Mahamudra. Because of this, we say that Rangjung Dorje primarily taught the zhentong view. In the lineage of wonderful Dzogchen teachers, the great Nyingma teacher, Longchenpa, originally taught Dzogchen in the heart essence, Longchen Nyingtig teachings. When Longchenpa taught Dzogchen, he taught it with the view of the zhentong, because to practice Dzogchen properly, we need to have the zhentong view. So the view of the zhentong is used whether practicing Mahamudra or Dzogchen meditation. This was also true for the great scholar and yogi Kyongpo Naljor, who founded the Shangpa Kagyu lineage and taught the 6 dharmas of Niguma. If we are doing the practice of the Mahamudra of the amulet, Gao, of Tangtog Gyalpo, which has been absorbed into the Shangpa lineage, we need to use the zhentong view. Our purpose for meditating is to create a spiritual experience that develops into realization. We can do this using direct perception, or we can use inference. It is easier if we first understand the view using inference and thoroughly analyze this view, which will then facilitate our direct perception. It is also very important that we have the zhentong view because the meditator mainly arrives at the understanding of the ground through the zhentong view as taught by Dolpopa's logic and reasoning. The Karma Kagyu lineage uses the zhentong view as taught by the 3rd Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje. The early transmission of the Nyingma lineage had the zhentong view as taught by Longchen Rabjam, Longchenpa. The Shangpa Kagyu school teaches the zhentong view of Dolpopa. Accordingly, we can say there are 3 different subviews of the zhentong view. There are, however, only minor differences between these 3 zhentong views in the words they use. But in terms of the nature of phenomena, they are, in essence, the same. For example, if we wanted to drive from Denver to Los Angeles, we might think, I know how to get there. I've been there. I know the way. Or we might need to get out a map and study it and think, I'll have to start on this road and go to that road, and so on. Otherwise, we might just hop in the car and drive off and end up going the wrong way, using the wrong road. It is the same when we practice Mahamudra and Dzogchen. Either we must have a direct experience with the meditation and think, oh, that's what it is, or we need to understand the basis or foundation of our meditation and decide what path we should take. If we understand that and have real certainty about it, it will help our meditation. By studying the zhentong view, we can easily understand the ground, path, and fruition when we meditate upon Mahamudra and Dzogchen. The treatise Dolpopa wrote to explain the zhentong view is called Mountain Dharma. The first English translation of this book by Hopkins was called The Mountain Doctrine. However, it should have been called Mountain Dharma because when we go up to a mountain to do meditation in a retreat, it is Mountain Dharma that we say we are practicing. Most of the Mahasiddhas practicing in India generally went off to do retreats in forests. Later, in Tibet, instead of forests, they would go up high into mountain caves to do their retreat. There are many different books using the name Mountain Dharma. For example, there is a book called Mountain Dharma by Karma Chagmé, and a book called Mountain Dharma that was composed by Dudjom Rinpoche. Although all have this same name, they are very different teachings. For example, Karma Chagmé's Mountain Dharma teaches what we should do in a retreat and how to handle certain kinds of thoughts that occur and even what to do if we get sick in retreat. In it, he also teaches what to do with all the varieties of experience that come up in solitary meditation and what sorts of practices to do. In the Mountain Dharma by Dudjom Rinpoche, there is a short teaching which teaches that we should not have a lot of attachment or clinging to the sense pleasures in worldly life, but rather practice in isolated places. The complete title of the Mountain Dharma by Dolpopa is Mountain Dharma, the Ocean of Certainty. He begins by giving the reasons we should want to go off and do a retreat. He also describes the nature of the mind by explaining that we all have the natural family, the Buddha nature that is present within us. However, to think we have Buddha nature is not enough. We need to know what Buddha nature is like. How does it reside within us? What exactly is its nature? If we understand this clearly, we will be able to attain awakening or enlightenment. Dolpopa's book also teaches that once we know that we have Buddha nature, this is the path that we need to practice on. Dolpopa also tells us how we need to practice, and then, after we have practiced this path, what the result will be like. The reason for the title Mountain Dharma, the Ocean of Certainty, is that this book contains the things we need to understand in order to go into isolation and meditate. This book draws from a vast number of sūtras and tantras and combines them into one single teaching, or as we say in Tibet, like water poured into the ocean. I, Thrangu Rinpoche, first encountered Dolpopa's teachings when I was very young and had the opportunity to meet the Shechen Kongtrul Rinpoche. He told me that the teachings of Dolpopa were very important and then gave me the reading transmission and the instructions for these teachings. I feel very fortunate to have had that opportunity. But with the changes that came about in 1959 in Tibet, many different lamas, myself included, had to flee from Tibet to India. When we arrived in India, books on Tibetan Dharma were extremely rare, and there were no copies of Dolpopa's Mountain Dharma anywhere. Later, Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche, thinking that this was a very important text, looked all over for it in the countries outside of Tibet, and managed to find a single copy of Dolpopa's book. Still, this copy was missing one page. Even though it was missing one page, Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche thought that because it was such an important text, he would nevertheless have it printed with one blank page where the missing page was supposed to go. He did this because he was hoping that in the future the missing page would be found and added to the book. Later, because of the blessings of the three jewels, Khyentse Rinpoche was able to obtain complete copies of this text. Presently, there are several different complete copies of Mountain Dharma, the Ocean of Certainty, in Tibetan. In addition, we now also have 2 English translations of this precious text. The 10 Powers of the Buddha. The qualities a bodhisattva must master to become a Buddha are 1. Reflection 2. Superior reflection 3. Acquisition 4. Discriminative awareness, prajna 5. Aspiration 6. Vehicle 7. Conduct 8. Transformation 9. Enlightenment or bodhicitta 10. Turning the wheel of Dharma. The four fearlessnesses. The four stages that a bodhisattva must attain are: 1. They are fearless because they first know they have completely abandoned all the disturbing emotions. 2. They are fearless because they know that they have complete realization. 3. They are fearless because they know that they have no doubts that the path will benefit sentient beings. 4. They are fearless because they know all the obstructions on the path. Chapter 2. Buddha Nature in the Scriptures. This chapter is devoted to Dolpopa's discussion of what the Buddhist scriptures say about Buddha nature. 1. The deity as the indivisibility of expanse and awareness. The space of the Dharma Dhatu from beginningless time is the place of all phenomena. Because it exists, all incarnations, as well as final nirvana, are attained. Asanga's commentary on the Sublime Continuum. The first topic is the indivisibility of the Dharma expanse and awareness, which is the deity that pervades all that is stable and moving. What this means is that the essence of Buddha nature shares with all phenomena the quality of being empty of inherent existence. This being true, both are in fact the Dharma expanse, Dharma Dhatu. The empty nature of phenomena is the Dharma Dhatu, and yet this empty nature of phenomena is not just an inanimate voidness. It has the quality of luminous clarity in the impure phase, which is expressed as the awareness of the mind. But when the mind is purified upon enlightenment, it becomes Dharma Dhatu wisdom. The union of Dharma Dhatu and wisdom is discussed in the Buddhist scriptures. These scriptures say that the deity is the indivisible union of Dharma Dhatu and awareness. When the scriptures say deity or God, we usually think about this deity as someone who can protect us, give us refuge, and lead us to happiness. Most non-Buddhist religions believe that deities are outside of ourselves. They pray and make offerings to them, and if the deity is pleased, they believe it will protect them and treat them well. On the other hand, if the deities are not pleased with what we do, they will give us great suffering or send us into the lower realms. However, that's not what Buddhists believe. The deity we are talking about here is not external to us. Rather, the deity resides within us and is simply the union of Dharma Dhatu and luminous clarity. This union can lead to our happiness because it is our own nature that allows us to eliminate the suffering of samsara. Hence, Buddha nature is this union of Dharma Dhatu and luminous clarity. This Buddha nature pervades everything that is stable and anything that moves. In other words, the outside world and all the people within it have Buddha nature. Dolpopa's initial argument discusses Buddha nature by quoting the sūtras and tantras. First, he supports his idea with quotes from the sūtras of the Buddha. The first quote from the sūtras is from the Sublime Continuum, which is one of the 5 treatises of Maitreya. The Sublime Continuum states that we have had Buddha nature since beginningless time. Since we all possess Buddha nature, we will be able to achieve the ultimate result of liberation and omniscience, provided we practice diligently on the path. What is the cause that allows us to do that? It is our Buddha nature. This quotation from the Sublime Continuum describes how all sentient beings have Buddha nature, with Sugatagarbha being another word for Buddha nature. As the entire world, all that is compounded, arises in space and is also destroyed in space, so in the uncompounded absolute space of the Dharma Dhatu, the skandhas, dhatus, and senses arise and are destroyed. Just as space, until now, has never been burned by fires, likewise this absolute Sugatagarbha cannot be burned by the destructive fires of sickness, death, and old age. Maitreya, the Sublime Continuum. A second quotation by Dolpopa was also taken from the Uttara Tantra Shastra, or Sublime Continuum. This passage discusses how the Sugatagarbha, or Buddha nature, pervades all phenomena, just as in the entire world everything arises and disintegrates within space. This verse says that Buddha nature is unchanging and permanent, just like space. When the world was formed, it happened within the expanse of space, and when the world is destroyed, it will also be destroyed within space. Yet space itself is neither created nor destroyed. Space, therefore, has no beginning. Its nature does not change, and it pervades everything. In the same way, we sentient beings have karma, activities, and disturbing emotions, often translated as afflictions. We engage in many different activities and disturbing emotions which are all impermanent. But where does karma occur? It occurs within the realm of Buddha nature, within the union of wisdom and emptiness. Consequently, it is within Buddha nature that everything happens. Despite this, the Buddha nature itself is not changed in any way by all this activity. The Sublime Continuum says that the essence of Buddha nature permeates and pervades everything. The suchness, dharmata, of all the levels of the Absolute, also the ground of all samsara and nirvana, abides in the form of self-arising pristine wisdom. The goodness of Sugatagarbha is also that itself. The densely arrayed realm sutra. A third quotation comes from Asanga's commentary on the Sublime Continuum, and a fourth quotation comes from the densely arrayed sutra, while a fifth quotation comes from a sutra called The Descent into Lankavatara. Each sutra has its own way of phrasing things, but the real meaning of all these quotations is the same. Buddha nature permeates everything. Following these citations is a sixth citation from Asanga stating that Buddha nature is present within all sentient beings. The essence of Buddha nature that is within all sentient beings is the ultimate virtue, the virtue of the ultimate truth. The seventh quotation comes from Mahaparinirvana Sutra, stating that Buddha nature is present within everyone. So if you are a Dharma practitioner, you have Buddha nature. But even if you are a non-Dharmic person with little virtue and wrong views who denigrates the sutras and the Dharma and who has committed horrible actions, you also have Buddha nature. The eighth citation comes from the Prajnaparamita Sutras, which primarily teach on the topic of emptiness, but don't directly discuss Buddha nature. Despite that, within these teachings there is a statement that there is the union of the Dharmadhatu and luminous clarity, which allows all Tathagatas, Buddhas, to become fully awakened into Buddhahood. This would indicate that the Prajnaparamita also discussed Buddha nature. Sugatagarbha, with its goodness, is not within the scope of logicians. The nature of absolute mind is luminosity. That is Sugatagarbha with its goodness. The Descent into Lanka Sutra. The ninth quotation is from the Descent into Lanka Sutra, and the 10th quotation is from the Sutra of the Essence of the Tathagata. These last two sutras originated from the third turning of the Wheel of Dharma and say very similar statements to what we have discussed before, from the Sublime Continuum. For the most part, these quotations are from the sutras of the second turning of the Wheel of Dharma, or the Middle Way School, and yet they state that all sentient beings have Buddha nature. After citing all the quotations from the sutras, Dolpopa then cites quotations from the tantras of the third turning of the Wheel of Dharma that also state Buddha nature is present within all sentient beings. When we say the words of the Buddha, we usually mean the words spoken by the Buddha Shakyamuni that are available in Pali, Chinese, and in Sanskrit. Most of these Dharma teachings come from translations into these three languages. The sutras in Pali have been preserved, but the Sanskrit teachings in India have mostly disappeared. However, these Sanskrit teachings were not completely lost, since most were translated and preserved in Tibetan. The words of the Buddha, the sutras, are also available in Tibetan. These teachings in Tibetan are quite vast and extensive, which makes them, in many ways, much more expansive than those found in the other traditions. The reason for this is that the Pali and Chinese Buddhist canons have quite a few translated sutras, but only a few of the tantras were translated, whereas in the Tibetan tradition most of the tantras were translated and preserved along with the sutras and are still available in Tibetan. In the Chinese tradition, the commentaries are primarily based on the sutras. However, in the Tibetan tradition, these treatises also include many commentaries on the tantras. With these tantras and their commentaries in Tibetan, the Tibetans were able to practice both the Mahayana and the Vajrayana. The Vajrayana spread to Tibet beginning with Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, in the 8th century. At that time, many different tantras were translated from Sanskrit into Tibetan under the direction of Padmasambhava and are called the earlier translations. Subsequently, translators such as Marpa, 1012 to 1097, Rinchen Sangpo, 958 to 1055, and others who lived almost 300 years later translated the tantras again into Tibetan. These are known as the later translations. Thus, there are a vast array of tantras that are available in Tibetan. The tantras taught by the Buddha are now divided into the 4 classes. Some of these, the Yoga Tantras, the Kriya or Action Tantras, and the Charya or Performance Tantras, spread from Tibet to China, and then to Japan and Korea, resulting in the Vajrayana being practiced in these countries as well. For instance, the Vajrayana practices in Japan mainly involve the practice of Vairocana and the mandala of Vairocana and his retinue, which came from the Tantra of the manifestly arisen Vairocana. This Tantra was originally written in Sanskrit, but now it is lost in Sanskrit, Pali, and Chinese languages. If we want to study the Tantra of Vairocana, we will have to study it in Tibetan. And so there are Vajrayana practitioners in Japan who are learning Tibetan in order to be able to study this Tantra. For the most part, the main teachings of the Vajrayana state that all sentient beings have Buddha nature. the essence of Buddha nature taught in the sutras is slightly different from the essence of Buddha nature taught in the tantras. The reason for this is that in the sutras, Buddha nature is primarily taught as the union of Dharma Dhatu and luminous clarity. However, in the Vajrayana, Buddha nature is taught as being the meditational deity itself, with the essence of the wisdom of the Yidam deity being the same as the union of the Dharma Dhatu and luminous clarity. Children of noble family, this Sugatagarbha is the Dharmata. Whether the Tathagatas arise in the world as form kayas or do not, all these sentient beings always possess Tathagatagarbha. Tathagatagarbha Sutra. Sentient beings are Buddhahood itself. However, they are obscured by incidental defilements. When these are cleared away, then they are actual Buddhas. Hevajra Tantra. Dolpopa gives several different quotations from the Vajrayana teachings. The first is from the Hevajra Tantra, and the second is from the Tantra of Explanations of Chakrasamvara. In brief, the Tantras are divided into the Father Tantras, which primarily teach skillful means, and the Mother Tantras, which primarily teach wisdom. The quotation from the Hevajra Tantra is from the Mother Tantras. Following that is a quotation from a Father Tantra, which primarily teaches skillful means or method, the Guhya Samaja Tantra. In this body of the Vajra Masters abide the respective bodies of the conquerors. The first, the body Vajra, Vairochana, abides as the actual skanda known as form, as a pure perception of that relative class. Desire Vajra, who is Ratnasambhava, pervades the relative skanda known as feeling. The Vajra of conquerors, Buddha's speech, who is Amitabha, pervades the skanda of relative perception. The Vajra of offering, who is Amoga Siddhi, pervades the relative skanda of formations. The Vajra of Blessed Victor's minds, Akshobhya, pervades the relative skanda known as consciousness. Guhya Samaja Tantra. Many different appearances arise out of Buddha nature. When these appearances are impure, they appear to us as our own body. However, when they arise in their pure form as the essence of Buddha nature, they appear as the body of a deity. In these verses, the 5 Buddha families are described as being the pure appearance of Buddha nature. To summarize this section, Dolpopa demonstrates that both sutras and tantras teach that Buddha nature is present within all sentient beings. 2. Buddha nature present in the 3 jewels. The second topic has 14 different points that support the idea that Buddha nature is present in all sentient beings. Dolpopa argues that Buddha nature and the 3 jewels have the same nature. Buddha nature and the 3 jewels are the same. This is because Buddha nature and the 3 jewels are both aspects of the Dharmakaya, which is the nature of phenomena. Usually, when we talk about the 3 jewels, we say that the Buddha is our teacher. The Buddha Shakyamuni is the first jewel, and he presented the teachings, which are the second jewel. Subsequently, those individuals who practiced the Dharma became the 3rd jewel, the Sangha. In terms of ultimate reality, Dolpopa says there are 2 types of these 3 jewels, the causal and the resultant 3 jewels. The resultant 3 jewels can give us protection from samsara. We need to be able to free ourselves from the suffering of samsara, so we practice the Dharma to attain the full result. For that reason, these are called the resultant 3 jewels. The causal 3 jewels on the relative level of reality are the conventional 3 jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The combined 3 jewels on the ultimate level of reality is the Buddha nature that we all have. By practicing the Dharma, we begin to realize what Buddha nature and Sangha is. So the 3 jewels are within us. The essence of the 3 jewels is Buddha nature. Since Buddha nature is present within all sentient beings, it can give us ultimate protection. Buddha nature is then considered to be on the ultimate level of reality. This means that from Buddha nature we can realize the true nature of reality. But to do this, we must make a great effort along the path and exert ourselves so that we will begin to understand the essence of Buddha nature. This concept is taught in the Pile of Jewels Sutra and in the Vajra Garland Tantra, as well as other tantras. 3. How the true nature of phenomena and Buddha nature relate. This third topic discusses how phenomena truly are, dharmata, and the way they are related to Buddha nature. In Sanskrit, Buddha nature is called Sugatagarbha, or the essence of the Sugata, with Sugata being the Buddha and Garbha being nature or essence. Sugatagarbha is simply Buddha nature. The Sublime Continuum, Uttaratantra Shastra, or Ratnagotra Vibhaga, gives 9 different examples to explain the characteristics of Buddha nature. One example of these 9 examples in the Sublime Continuum is a small Buddha statue hidden within a lotus flower. As long as the statue remains inside a lotus, there is no way that we can see it. But when the lotus fully blossoms, we can see the Buddha statue. Another example is a gold statue of the Buddha that falls onto the ground and is gradually covered with all sorts of dirt and garbage until it can no longer be seen. If we find it and clean the dirt away, we will see that this golden statue of the Buddha was always right there. In the same way, we have many different appearances of the world. But these sights, sounds, tastes, and so on obscure and hide our Buddha nature so that we will not be able to experience it. However, these sights and sounds and appearances of phenomena are just fleeting and adventitious stains. If we meditate, we will be able to eliminate these adventitious stains and perceive and realize our Buddha nature. In a similar way, during Mahamudra and Dzogchen meditation, we usually explain these practices in terms of perceiving the nature of the mind, or experiencing ordinary mind. When we have completely realized the true nature of mind, we have reached Buddhahood. Each of the 9 examples in the Sublime Continuum represent a slightly different meaning of Buddha nature. 4 and 5. Buddha nature as a family. Since the enlightened family that exists in everyone is naturally completely pure, it is never proper for it to be impure in itself. Therefore, the Blessed One said, with the assumption that it exists in all sentient beings, without distinction, that it is possible for them to attain complete purity from incidental defilements. Asanga's commentary on the Sublime Continuum. The 4th, 5th, and 6th topics on Buddha nature concern the enlightened family or lineage, Tibetan Rig, Sanskrit Gotra. The 4th topic states that Buddha nature is the seed or potential that is present within all of us, as described above in Asanga's commentary on the Sublime Continuum. The naturally existing families were of the 6 victorious ones. With an abbreviation of those, there were only 5. Later, by the divisions of body, speech, and mind, these were further abbreviated into 3, Hevajra Tantra. The 5th and 6th topics discuss this concept of lineage in terms of the 5 or 6 Buddha families. There are many teachings describing the 5 or 6 Buddha families in the Vajrayana. For convenience, these are often condensed into 3 Buddha families, each having either the nature of wisdom, compassion, or power. There are many different classifications of the families, all simply divisions of the essence of Buddha nature. 6. Buddha nature and the Vajra family. The indestructible is known as Vajra, absolute bliss. Sattva is the unity of the 3 realms. By prajna, inseparable from skillful means of this reasoning, the name of Vajrasattva is explained. Dolpopa's chapter on the Vajra families. Dolpopa presents the fact that Buddha nature belongs to the Vajra family. In the Vajrayana, Vajra means something that does not change. Hence we have unchanging Buddha nature. But it is hidden by the continuously changing adventitious stains. The nature or essence of Buddha nature, however, does not change from lifetime to lifetime. When we attain Buddhahood, the Buddha nature fully manifests. So we can say that the essence of Buddha nature is unchanging, and that is why it is in the Vajra family. 7. Buddha nature is all-pervasive. The Buddha nature of sentient beings is like space. Space is not in the past. It is not in the future. It is not in the present. It is not inside. It is not outside. It is not included within forms, sounds, tastes, smells, and touch. Buddha nature is also like that. Mahaparinirvana Sutra. The Buddha nature of sentient beings is like space. Space has no past, no present, and no future. It is not inside or outside, and it is not in the 5 sensory objects of images, sounds, tastes, smells, or touch. This topic explains that Buddha nature is like space in that Buddha nature is all-pervasive and permeates everything, all 5 elements of earth, water, fire, air, and space. All these elements arise within space. The 5 elements all change over time, but space does not change in any way. So something from the past was created in space. In the future, the object will still be pervaded by space. In the same way, Buddha nature is the ground or basis of everything. As sentient beings, Buddha nature is within us. At the time when we become Buddhas, it is also present within us. Therefore, Buddha nature is not special to a certain person or time, but it permeates everything. 8. Buddha nature is unchanging. That they may be impure or pure and impure of constant or intermittent defilements, or they may be utterly, completely pure. These are said, respectively, of sentient beings, of bodhisattvas, and of tathagatas. the sublime continuum. The next two topics teach that the essence of Buddha nature is unchanging. Although it does not change, there are three different stages that Buddha nature undergoes. Dolpopa cites the sublime continuum, which enumerates these stages as impure, partially impure, and utterly pure in describing sentient beings, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas, Tathagatas, respectively. The first stage occurs when we manifest as an impure sentient being. Even though the Buddha nature itself is not stained, it is hidden by adventitious stains. When it is hidden by these stains or disturbing emotions, we call it the stage of being a sentient being. We have all the impurities and all the negative adventitious stains that hide the Buddha nature during this time. When we begin to practice and begin to follow the Dharma path and have eliminated most of our adventitious stains, we enter the stage of a bodhisattva. Our Buddha nature itself hasn't changed at all. The difference between ordinary persons and bodhisattvas is whether the adventitious stains have been purified or not. Finally, when all our adventitious stains have been completely and utterly purified, we arrive at the stage of being a Buddha. 9. The three stages of beings in the sūtras. In this topic, the three stages of sentient beings are described in Vasubandhu's commentary on the Prajna Paramita, which is part of the second turning of the Wheel of Dharma. It refers to the teachings of the long 100,000, middle length 25,000, and short 8,000-line sutras of the Prajna Paramita. In these sutras, the presence of Buddha nature is described as having three different stages: impure, partially pure, and utterly pure stages. 10. Purifying the disturbing emotions in the Vajrayana. Vairochana is hatred, which is the highest family of the absolute ground of emptiness. Ratnasambhava is pride, the family of power. Amitabha is passion, the family of the great Dharma of the Mahayana vehicle. Jealousy is the family of Amoga Siddhi. Akshobhya is the family of the great ignorance. The one who is the cause, creator, and sealer of this tantra, and of all these five families, is suchness. Vajrasattva, also suchness Vajra being, because he is the completely non-abiding essence, and pervades all phenomena, but causally interacts with none. He also exists within the family of Akshobhya, Guhya Samaja Tantra. This topic describes how to purify our numerous disturbing emotions. When we completely purify the disturbing emotion of desire, we can call this great desire. When we completely purify our hatred and aggression, then we have the great hatred. When we completely purify ignorance, then we have great ignorance. The reason for calling these great is that the essence of our desire, anger, and ignorance does not actually transcend nor overcome Buddha nature. In the Vajrayana, we describe the essence of completely purified desire as the completely purified wisdom of Amitabha. The essence of completely purified aggression is the completely purified wisdom of Akshobhya. The essence of completely purified pride is Ratnasambhava's wisdom. In other words, when the essences of our disturbing emotions are utterly purified, they become the five wisdoms of the five Buddha families. But all these five different families and afflictions come down to Buddha nature. It is because we have Buddha nature that they exist. This Buddha nature is the ground on which they manifest. 11. The ground and fruition are inseparable. The ground is the state we are experiencing at the level of ordinary sentient beings, and the goal or result is Buddhahood. The temporary adventitious stains or confused thoughts that we have seem like they are separate from our enlightened nature. But on the ultimate level, the ground and result are both the true nature of phenomena. That is why we all have Buddha nature within ourselves. When we awaken completely and are in nirvana, it is nothing other than just directly experiencing our Buddha nature. And when we awaken to Buddha nature, it is nothing other than just experiencing Buddha nature. 12. The indivisibility of the ground and path. Buddha nature is both the ground and the path to enlightenment, and the qualities of the ground and path are indivisible from Buddha nature. They are also the Dharmakaya, that is, the true nature of phenomena, as they actually are. This means that Buddha nature has been present within us from the very beginning of time. It's not like we didn't have it before, and now, with spiritual practice, it arises as some new quality, or that Buddha nature is something that we don't have now, and when we have reached realization, we will have somehow created it. Rather, Buddha nature was with us from the very beginning, and it has always been with us as the true nature of phenomena. Dolpopa sums this up with, "These words say that the completely established nature of phenomena, their essence, is the mind of the Tathagatas. Since this is also the self-arising of the five pristine wisdoms, The intention is that this nature is also the completely established, inseparable essence of ground and fruition. Dolpopa, Mountain Dharma. 13. The Dharmakaya contains all the qualities of a Buddha. Dolpopa quotes Asanga here. Within that essence are the undefiled qualities of Buddhahood, the 32 powers and other qualities which are as numerous as the grains of sand of the river Ganges. They definitely exist, even on the level of sentient beings afflicted by the all-pervading disturbing emotions, though they are not manifest for these beings. This is because the essence, the nature of phenomena that pervades all of samsara and nirvana, exists pervasively and indivisibly. The one taste of the pervasive nature of phenomena is without distinction earlier in the occasion of a defiled sentient being, and later in the occasion of an undefiled Buddha. Therefore, this topic is inconceivable. Asanga's commentary on the Sublime Continuum. This topic argues that the Dharmakaya has all the qualities of the Buddha. Within the Dharmakaya, which is present within us, there are also all the positive qualities of the Buddha. This includes the 10 powers, the 4 fearlessnesses, the 18 unshared qualities, great compassion, and the 4 foundations of mindfulness. These are present within our Buddha nature. Even if we have wrong views, strong disturbing emotions, or difficult problems, all these positive qualities of a Buddha are present within our Buddha nature, and we can still attain Buddhahood to make our Buddha nature manifest. 14. Did Nagarjuna and followers teach Buddha nature? Just as when it is present, mixed with milk, the essence of butter within it does not appear, so by mixture with the afflictive emotions, Dharma Dhatu also does not appear. Just as by refining it, by churning it from milk, the essence of butter will be undefiled, so by purification of afflictions, Dharma Dhatu is utterly undefiled, and so manifests. Nagarjuna, in praise of the Dharma Dhatu, Dharma Dhatu Stava. This topic is a very important section, because normally we think that the scholars of the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, such as Nagarjuna, do not accept that Buddha nature exists. Usually scholars say that Nagarjuna simply taught that all phenomena are empty. In Tibet, this is what was called the rangtong, self-empty view. However, Dolpopa said that this is not actually true. He claimed that Nagarjuna, founder of the Middle Way school, taught the existence of Buddha nature. Dolpopa also said that Nagarjuna's students, Bhaviveka, Aryadeva, and others in his lineage, such as Chandrakirti, also stated very clearly that Buddha nature exists. Through examples, Nagarjuna taught that Buddha nature exists in praise of the Dharma Dhatu. In this work, he gives 12 examples of Buddha nature existing, though it is not apparent since it is covered by obscurations. One of Nagarjuna's examples cited by Dolpopa states that in the impure phase of sentient beings, we don't perceive our Buddha nature. However, when our mind has been purified, our Buddha nature naturally manifests. Nagarjuna explained this by saying Buddha nature is like butter and milk. Before it is processed and the butter is still part of the raw milk, we can't really see that the milk contains any butter, because it is smoothly blended in with the milk. In the same way, as ordinary persons, our Buddha nature is mixed in with the disturbing emotions so that we don't perceive it. But when we begin to churn the milk, the butter separates out. Similarly, in our meditation, when we can separate out our Buddha nature from the disturbing emotions, our Buddha nature will manifest. Nagarjuna uses many different examples. Here, Dolpopa quotes from Nagarjuna to teach how we all have Buddha nature. Just as a lamp that is inside a vase cannot even a little bit be perceived, likewise, in the vase of the afflictions, Dharma Dhatu cannot be perceived. Likewise, when it is covered by afflictions, though Dharma Dhatu is undefiled by nature, its light cannot shine forth within samsara, but in nirvana it is luminous. Nagarjuna, in praise of the Dharma Dhatu. Another example concerning Buddha nature comes from Nagarjuna's closest pupil, the great Aryadeva. He taught that on the level of ultimate reality, Dundam, there are no solid things, nor any examples of things that are not empty. But still there is a self-awareness that is indivisible from this empty aspect. The example he gives is that this awareness is like a lamp or candle hidden within a clay vase. When the lamp is inside the vase, we cannot see it. But if the vase is smashed with a hammer, we will be able to see the light within. In the same way, we all have Buddha nature, but our Buddha nature is hidden within us. Our adventitious stains are covering it up. So if we take the hammer of meditation instructions given to us by our teacher and smash the adventitious stains, then our Buddha nature will manifest. Dolpopa also quotes the great Chandrakirti, who is known for his works on emptiness. In his commentary, A Clear Lamp for the Guhya Samaja, he says, The abode of all Buddhas is all sentient beings because all beings are possessors of Sugatagarbha. In Entering the Middle Way, Chandrakirti comments, whether Buddhas arise or they do not, in reality the emptiness of the nature of all real things has been proclaimed as emptiness of the reality of other. The true, pure, ultimate reality, as well as suchness, is the emptiness of other things. Other reality is the supreme arising of suchness, dharmata. This, arising as supreme, is eternal existence. Chandrakirti, Entering the Middle Way. This quote is significant because the definition of other is part of the word zhentong. Shen is other, and tong is empty. So according to Dolpopa, whether we discuss the different types of emptiness or the teachings on emptiness of the Middle Way, these teachings are very harmonious with the teachings of the Zhentong tradition. In this chapter we have covered 14 different topics on Buddha nature. The concept of Buddha nature was not invented by scholars. Rather, it was a teaching that the Buddha taught in the sūtras and the tantras. That Dolpopa presented evidence that Buddha nature exists was also taught by Nagarjuna and his followers, who are nevertheless associated with the rangtong approach. Finally, Dolpopa has also shown that the presence of Buddha nature is described in the Buddhist scriptures. Questions. Question. If Buddha nature is wisdom awareness, can Rinpoche please explain how wisdom awareness pervades all phenomena, including rocks, trees, and so on? Rinpoche. Buddha nature does permeate or pervade all the rocks and trees. The reason is that all those rocks and trees and other external things are just appearances of our own mind. For example, if we see rocks or trees in a dream, these appearances of the rocks or trees are not created outside of our mind. Similarly, when we perceive external objects during the daytime, these appearances are also not outside of our mind. They are present in our own mind, and our mind is permeated by Buddha nature. Therefore, the rocks and trees are also permeated by Buddha nature. Question. Why is Buddha nature without beginning and without end? Rinpoche. This is something that my tutor taught me. He said that we really need to understand the Zhentong view, but to really know the Zhentong view, we must first understand the rangtong view extremely well. The reason is that we must first thoroughly understand that all phenomena are inherently empty. All phenomena, everything that we can experience, is empty and cannot be proven to have any substantial existence. In the same way, the essence of Buddha nature is also empty because it is the union of the Dharma Dhatu, which is emptiness and luminous clarity. But when we describe this Dharma Dhatu, or expansive phenomena, we find that this emptiness is not simply inanimate or voidness, because this expanse has a quality of awareness. So it is not anything like an empty cup. There is a difference between the empty nature of space and the empty nature of Buddha nature. When we consider empty space, we just see nothing. We know that space can't do anything and doesn't have any qualities. However, Buddha nature is not like empty space because it has all the positive qualities of clarity, compassion, love, wisdom, and power. And yet, if we examine the essence of Buddha nature, it is not solid or real. Therefore, being empty, it cannot have a beginning or an end. Question. How can we study this Mountain Dharma book, and how can it possibly be helpful for us in our daily lives? Rinpoche. When the Buddhist Dharma first began to spread in North America, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche introduced Shambhala training. The ultimate purpose of Shambhala training was to teach the right view, because this would help his students achieve complete and perfect Buddhahood. In temporary terms, it was also to bring happiness to each and every individual so that they could develop their full capacity. That is why the Shambhala training was started. The basic and essential teaching of this training is that all sentient beings have basic goodness, and because they have it, there is no reason to be discouraged. Therefore, we can be encouraged and joyful about this fact. What is basic goodness? It is Buddha nature. If we are not able to develop a sense of authentic presence in our Dharma practice or in our worldly pursuits, we might become afraid or discouraged. In Shantideva's The Bodhisattva's Way of Life, this discouragement is called the laziness of self-deprecation. It is thinking to yourself that you are bad and unable to do anything good. But there is absolutely no reason to think that you are incapable or terrible. This is because in the Zhentong view, we all possess Buddha nature, which is called basic goodness, in Shambhala training. We do have this authentic presence within us, and therefore we should have this real confidence in ourselves. In the Kagyu teachings, the first thing taught in the first chapter of Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation is how to eliminate the laziness of self-deprecation. Dolpopa teaches the existence of Buddha nature and gives citations from Maitreya's Sublime Continuum, saying that all sentient beings possess Buddha nature. So there is absolutely no reason to lose confidence in the Buddhist teachings because we all possess the 18 freedoms of our precious human body. 9 examples of Buddha nature. Thrangu Rinpoche did not have time to go over all 9 of the examples of Buddha nature, so we have gotten all 9 here taken from Ives Waldo's translation of Mountain Dharma. 1. The Buddha. Like a golden statue of the Buddha lodged in the cover of a lotus. The metaphor is that Buddha nature is the statue of the Buddha, and the dirty mud out of which the lotus came and which covers the statue are the disturbing emotions, obscurations. 2. The honey. Honey abiding in the midst of swarming angry bees. The sweet honey represents Buddha nature, and the angry bees are the disturbing emotions, especially anger. 3. The kernel of grain. The essence of Buddha nature is the edible kernel of grain, and the disturbing emotions are the hard husk. 4. The lump of gold buried in dirt. Buddha nature is the lump of gold, and the disturbing emotions are the surrounding covering of dirt. 5. The precious treasure hidden in the earth. Buddha nature is the precious treasure, and the disturbing emotions are the earth hiding the treasure. 6. The Nyagroda tree sprout. A small sprout that becomes a gigantic tree, showing that vast Buddha nature can come from a tiny seed. 7. The statue of the Buddha containing precious substances hidden in tattered rags. In this metaphor, the precious Buddha statue is Buddha nature, and the rags are the disturbing emotions. 8. The universal monarch in the fetus of an ugly woman. A universal monarch is the Buddha nature present in everyone, and an ugly woman represents negative outside forces. 9. The statue with precious substances placed in a clay mold. The precious image placed in an ordinary clay mold is a metaphor for precious Buddha nature being obscured by the many defilements of incidental afflictions. Like this, precious Buddha nature abides in ordinary sentient beings. Maitreya, the Supreme Continuum.